Hey listeners, Sebastian here. Just a quick heads up / trigger warning. On this episode, there's a brief discussion on the mass shootings that have plagued the U.S. in the last 20 years. At the time of the recording, the terrible incidents in both Georgia and Colorado had not happened. It goes without saying that Jen and I have the deepest sympathy for anyone whose life was lost or in any way affected by these tragedies, and we hate that these things continue to happen. If hearing this subject discussed is going to in any way upset you in light of these recent events, we understand if you need to sit this episode out, and we hope that you rejoin us next episode. Thanks. Welcome to Tentpole Trauma, the podcast where we look at movies that came with hype and high hopes, but left with crushing disappointment, either critically, at the box office, or both. Freed from the weight of expectations, we seek to examine these underperformers under a new light, parsing through the good, the bad, and everything in between with the hopes of gaining a better understanding as to why they failed to find their audience. Warning, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie that we're discussing today, I suggest you stop the podcast and go watch it. Then when you come back and listen, you'll get more out of the discussion. On this week's episode, we discuss David Fincher's Fight Club. Okay, I am Sebastian, and I'm here with Jennifer.
Hello.
We're doing another Just Jennifer podcast.
Just Jennifer?
Jennifer.
Are you not here?
I'm here, but you are my only guest.
Annie's here, too.
Annie the dog is here. She will possibly be chiming in with some insight. Today we are doing the movie Fight Club, and the first rule of Fight Club is that you're not supposed to talk about Fight Club.
But here we are.
We're going to talk about it. Now, this is sort of a podcast we threw together quickly because we had a little bit of a scheduling emergency, but we made do. That's the nice thing about having two podcasters under one roof. You can throw things together quickly. Now, Fight Club is an interesting movie because I think most people assume that Fight Club was a hit because it has had such a huge cultural impact. But Fight Club was not a hit. It came out, I think, in around late summer or fall of 1999, and it cost $63 million, which was a lot of money at that time and a lot of money for the kind of movie that it is. And it only made like $17 million opening weekend. Yeah, and it didn't do very well in the States overall. I think it only made like $30 million in the States, and it made more than that worldwide, but it was considered a bomb, and it was kind of surprising because I think everybody was anticipating it to be a big deal because it was Brad Pitt, and he was reteaming with David Fincher, and they had had a big hit a few years earlier with Seven. And it was kind of like, it was based on a Chuck Palahniuk novel, which was, I think, pretty popular. So I think everybody was expecting it to be a hit, and it just wasn't. People just didn't show up. However, it has had a huge, I think, impact on culture. Memes and sayings from the movie, and it's just one of those movies that pretty much everybody has seen. I think it was a big hit once it hit video, which at that time would have been VHS in the early days of DVD. I remember it being a big deal in the early days of DVD, like it was one of the first DVDs that had all sorts of extras and stuff like that. So, I mean, it has definitely recovered culturally. But initially upon release, it was a box office failure. Now, you've seen Fight Club, I know, before. What are your first memories of Fight Club?
Well, as I was thinking about it earlier today, and I think I did see the movie first in theater and then read the book after. I was trying to remember which way it was, but I really think it was the movie that, like, especially because of the twist and everything that was coming up.
Yeah.
I feel like I experienced that first cinematically.
Right.
And then I read the book shortly thereafter. and I'm a huge fan of the author since, and read a lot more of his books. But this was the first of his books that I had read. Yeah, I definitely saw it in the theater, and I don't think I've seen it kind of in bits and pieces since then, but I honestly don't think I've sat down and like really taken it in again.
Mm-hmm.
Probably since I saw it in the theater. Like, I don't think I've, like, it may have been on, like, in the background or something since then, but, like, it's been, and it's since 99. So that was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I've, like, given it my full attention again. And I remember enjoying the book also. And now I do think it was after seeing the film. I thought, it was a good adaptation. And I love David Fincher.
Yeah.
Huge fan. And, all the actors that were in it. So, yeah, I remember liking it and being excited to see it in the theater.
I am also a big David Fincher fan. I am one of the few people in the world who really loves Alien 3. Yes,
you do.
I love Alien 3. I think it's a great movie. And to be fair, I'm not one of the only people in the world. There are a lot of actually underground Alien 3 fans. But I really love that movie, for all its flaws. He has basically disowned it. He was really unhappy with the way it went. So he is not a fan of Alien 3. I do love 7. I'm a big fan of 7. I like the game. I didn't think it was that good when it came out because I was just like, the twist made my eyes roll back in my head. But I've since come to appreciate what it does well, which is quite a few things. And I don't think I saw Fight Club when it came out in the theater. I think it was just my life was in just a place where I just didn't get around to it. I definitely saw it pretty quickly, though. I think I saw it when it came out on video right away because I was interested in it. But for whatever reason, it was just one of those things. I think it came out one weekend that I was busy and then it didn't do well and then it was gone before I had a chance to see it. So I do not believe I saw it in the theater. When I first saw it, I remember liking it, but I kind of was lukewarm on some of the parts. Of course, it's a big twist movie. This was when the big twists were really coming. Like, it was the dawn of the big twist. And I think after this and Sixth Sense especially, we got a lot of twist movies. It's like the aughts were just full of twists. And I would definitely put this movie like the top of the twists. Twists are funny because I feel like a movie has to have a super, 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 super solid good twist for me to not kind of be pissed at it, you know what I mean? And there's a few things in this movie. I remember thinking the twist was good, but there were a few moments where I was like, that doesn't make sense. Whereas something like Sixth Sense, the Sixth Sense kind of blew me away because after I saw it, I was like, oh my God, every single thing about that twist works. And it got me. I didn't get it. It totally floored me when it happened. This movie, I was like, okay, you got me with the twist, but I'm not so sure I buy it. But I do. I mean, obviously, I do buy it. I think it's a good twist. It's it's got to be the twist. But looking back on it now, I think I remember when I first saw it, I was like, you kind of cheated with that twist. But we'll talk about it. So yeah, it stars Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. They're the main characters. And Helena Bonham Carter, I would say, is the third most important character. And then we get a lot of other actors in smaller roles, most notably Jared Leto, although he's barely in the movie. He's not really in that much of the movie. And he gets a lot of credit for this movie. And I'm like, Jared Leto's not in this movie all that much.
Yeah, I mean, he's not in it that much. And I remember it being a big deal that he was in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it hadn't been that long since My So-Called Life.
Yeah.
And I think it's more that, I mean, he, we'll get to his
It's more what happens to his
him.
character, how
Yeah.
he's utilized, I think is what.
Yeah, that's what it's memorable for.
Right, and coming off of My So-Called Life, where he's this sort of teen heartthrob, he destroyed his own image quite literally in this movie. So, and then he would be in David Fincher's next movie. He would be in Panic Room. He's like the main villain in that.
That's
so
right.
I think he owes David Fincher a debt of gratitude for basically pulling him out of the pretty boy ghetto. And he did it with real style in this movie. So this movie follows the narrator, who is played by Edward Norton. That's his only name that he's given in the movie, for a reason, because we basically find out what his real name is. He's 30 years old, which would have been around the time, close to the age I was when this movie came out. He has sort of devoted his life to his job and, acquiring material things. He's got a condo he really likes, and it's all full of like IKEA bullshit that he really likes, including a yin yang coffee table, which is really ridiculously obnoxious. But he's, like many men approaching, or at the gates of middle age, I would say, he is unfulfilled. So how do you feel about Edward Norton in general? Do you like Edward Norton?
I do. I think he's a great actor. I'm always happy. I really one of my favorite Edward Norton films is 25th Hour.
Yes,
that's
a good
I think
one.
he's so great in that.
Spike Lee.
Yeah, so good. I mean, he's also great in American History X. I mean, there's a lot of good, and he's wonderful in this. I think he was perfectly cast for this.
Yeah.
It makes me want to actually read the book again, because it's been 20 some odd years since I've read the book, to see how, I mean, I remember at the time I didn't feel like reading the book that it wasn't a good match, but
Right.
I'm just, now since I am revisiting the film after so many years, like at least giving it my full attention, I kind of want to read the book again. But anyway, I think he was perfectly cast as this character. I think it's interesting because it's a similar type. It's like not a yuppie,
Yeah.
but it's like Gen X yuppie kind
Yeah,
of. It's
the
like
Gen X version of
yeah, because
the reluctant yuppie.
it
I
is
would
the
call
reluctant
him.
yuppie. Like he would never identify as a yuppie.
Yeah.
Whereas like I feel like in the 80s, like a lot of yuppies were proud to be yuppies and like would happily identify with that. It's funny because I think they even Brad Pitt's character might even say it, but it was kind of like a reference to the Replacements, Bastards of Young, where he says something like, that line where it's like, we've got no war to name us.
Yeah.
And it's, it's just, it's that age, that time. I just think it was really saying something. And I think that was a really, like, we're just kind of lost.
Yeah.
And really, like, he's identifying himself and with stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, I think everyone on some level can identify with that. I mean, this is to an extreme as far as like, he's like, and it's interesting to see watching it again now, like not having the computers that, so easily to just buy stuff. It's actually, you had to go through catalogs and call and like, order stuff through the phone. It's just, we've just gotten so far away from that now. But anyway.
We've gotten into whole new levels of consumerism.
Yes. Much more rapid consumerism with an app where you can just press a button and I don't know. Yeah, I like his character, and I think his character is very easy to identify with.
I mean, I definitely think it's a very Gen X movie. I feel that a lot of the things this movie is saying directly addresses things that the Gen X was feeling. I mean, I certainly can relate to a lot of things. I never went that route.
Me either.
But I can understand falling into it, and then that becomes sort of who you are. But so he knows that he's really not this person despite having all this stuff. So he's sort of, looking for something else. But the thing that really sort of kicks off his character journey is that he can't sleep. He's an insomniac. So basically, the first solution that he comes to is that he goes to different self-help groups.
Well, he goes to a doctor first because he's gone I think 4 or 5 nights in a row without sleeping.
Yeah. And
I think David Fincher does a great job of showing and just the whole stylized, like the way that the film is styled, and just it's so David Fincher, and it's so great in that way.
Highly influential too. The way this movie looks affected the way movies looked for a long time. It's similar to The Matrix in that way, where The Matrix also had sort of a style thing about it that affected movies. But yeah,
this, and also his style, which was right around this time too, it wasn't much later, was, remember the movie Go? It definitely has that same feel to it as well.
Yeah.
But I think he does a great job of showing what it's like when you have been sleep deprived
Yeah.
for days, and it's just like, you're just going through the motions, and everything's like, it's just he visually like makes you feel like you're dealing with insomnia when he's like at work and everything's like you can't like womp womp womp,
Well, and he throws in subliminal little flashes of Brad Pitt. Did you notice that?
Yes.
You see, like, because
Yes.
subliminal imagery becomes sort of a point later, and you see these sort of flashes of Brad Pitt while he's at his job.
Yes. And then also at his job too, there's this one like really cool shot of like coming out of the garbage can with it's like a Krispy Kreme box and like, the Starbucks and just all this like it's consumerism and, any sugar, caffeine, all this stuff. So anyway, he goes to a doctor and he's like, I can't sleep and, all this stuff. And he's trying to get the doctor to give him a prescription.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, no, like, I don't feel sorry for you. Like, choose some valerian root and like just get some sleep, And he's like, if you want to feel bad or like feel like, what it's like to suffer, then go to the meeting at like First Methodist on Tuesday nights, the men's meeting. So that's what first brings him to self-help is he goes to this support group for men for testicular cancer.
One other thing I'll just add really quickly, which ties into your point about like the wastebasket stuff. There are a lot of sort of shots where we go into things. Fincher uses CGI to go into like, garbage cans or go through the walls and look at things. And so we start the movie with this sort of, we're going through like somebody's brain kind of.
Yes.
And it's set to this
The Dust
Brothers music. And this sort of approach to the credits will also be super influential. Like the X-Men movies did a similar thing. The aughts had a lot of movies that would open with like, oh, we're inside your mind, or we're going through time, or whatever.
Lawnmower Man.
Yeah. It was a very common thing, but that whole thing he does a lot with CG. So we go inside a lot of things, and it's just something he does in the movie.
Which, by the way, excellent use of CG. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to, I feel like the past couple of podcasts I've kind of bagged on CG. I don't hate CG. I like when it's used well, because I'm like, we should use technology and use it in a good way. It's just like there's sometimes where it's just overdone and, whatever. But Fincher uses it really well, especially for this time.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, and you've said this as well. It's like, it's definitely setting the tone for style that we're going to see for a while.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like watching it now, again, like full attention, like really paying attention to every detail because we're going to talk about it, it doesn't feel super dated to me.
No, it doesn't. There's a few things here and there, but like they're more cultural things, not really things in the movie itself. But yeah, so anyway, as you're saying, he has to, in order to sleep, he decides to go try out some self-help groups. And one of them is for men with testicular cancer.
Yeah.
One of the men in the group is played by 70s rocker Meatloaf, whose name is Bob, but his nickname is Bitch Tits, which is something I don't think probably would be put in a movie now.
No.
It's a little insensitive.
I mean, I guess I should say the film doesn't look dated, but there's a lot of things that didn't really age
definitely
well.
Well, I mean, the movie's dealing with sort of toxic masculinity
Absolutely.
too. So I think a lot of people took from this movie, took some bad ideas.
Absolutely.
And that's unfortunate.
No, they missed kind of
The point.
Yes.
But so this character, Bob, played by Meatloaf, is hugging Edward Norton and sort of pulling him into his giant pendulous man breasts that he has because he's had to do hormone therapy. He was a former bodybuilder, and so he has this unfortunate body issue. So basically, Edward Norton is going to these meetings, and now he can sleep because he can release his emotions, while he's being cradled by Meatloaf, and now he's able to get some sleep.
Yeah, because he could actually cry.
Yeah.
Like that was the whole thing. Is like he was able, like you said, release his emotions, and so like then we cut to where he's like sleeping like a baby.
Yeah.
Like he just having the best sleep of his life, which is like it's true. Like as far as like if you've been holding something in and you have a good cry, like you feel pretty fucking great.
Well, and I think that's our first indicator that this movie is about masculinity issues and men trying to reconnect with some sort of primal man element where they can be in touch with their emotions, however negative they may be. But yeah, so he is able to sleep thanks to attending these meetings, and he goes to all these different types of meetings, and he pretends to have whatever ailment or whatever it is that they're discussing, and of course he doesn't. There's this kind of really sad scene where this woman who has cancer gets up and talks about how she just wants to have sex, and she'll have sex with basically anybody. She wants to have sex before she dies. It's kind of heartbreaking moment, but also a black comedy.
It's very dark, yeah.
Moment, which this movie is definitely a black comedy.
Yes,
I would say more than anything.
100%.
So, this all looks like it's going pretty well for him, but then a wrinkle gets thrown into the game.
Well, and also this is when we're like, we definitely don't know his name, because when he's going to all of these meetings, he has to put on a sticker badge, and he's using, like, of course, because he's going as, he's this imposter that's going to these meetings. So he's got like Cornelius and, I don't know, Steve or whatever. He's got all these like phony names.
Lenny, I think.
Lenny was one. Yeah, Lenny was one that he's going. So he's like totally, and I mean, it's like tuberculosis support group, like all kinds of random stuff. And then he starts to notice Marla Singer, who is played by Helena Bonham Carter, and he's just pissed. Like, he's having conversations with himself in his head about how he's like just gonna like let her have it, because he's like, she's a tourist and all this, which he is too, but now like she's like squashed his game, and now he can't, because he knows there's another like faker there. He can't get what he was getting from these meetings. He can't get his release and cry and get sleep, because now someone else is doing the same thing, and he's livid about it. And she's great. Like, she's like this hot mess, and just like, especially going to like the tuberculosis meeting or like the cancer meeting, and she just chain smoking inside.
She's going to the testicular cancer meeting, which clearly she's not.
But as she points out to him when they do have like their first interaction, she's like, I actually have more belonging there than you do,
because she doesn't have them.
I don't have my balls.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's just like, and which was also, that was a little bit of a time capsule, because you haven't been able to smoke inside in forever. Like, that was something that, I was thinking, like, she's smoking inside. I'm like, oh yeah, you could do that then some places still at the late 90s. Anyway, they have words, and she even like says, oh, I've been watching you have this this scenario that you're like telling me off. Did it meet up to your expectations? And just really like giving it to him. So they come to this agreement that they'll like split the meetings.
Yeah.
So, they can each have 3 and then alternating Sundays. And while they are coming to this agreement, he's following her. Like, she's walking out into traffic.
Yeah.
Like, she has like 0 fucks.
Yeah.
Like, just cars are whizzing by her. And then she goes into a laundromat and just grabs clothes out of the dryer.
Yeah.
And he's just still following her. And then they go over to like a consignment shop, and she's like selling these clothes that she just stole. Like, she's just like, kind of just a horrible person, as far as, moralistically speaking or whatever.
She's sort of like the manic pixie dream girl,
yes,
but done like so dark.
Yes.
Where she's definitely living life the way she wants.
Absolutely.
But it's like horrible, kind of.
It's horrible. And she's still like, I mean, she's still gorgeous to me. At least, I don't know. I still think she's like totally hot, even though she's just like this just dirty mess, like kind of just a horrible person.
Well, it was interesting because before this movie, Helena Bonham Carter was known for doing like merchant ivory period pieces. She's British. She was, always playing like the young ingenue, like her and Kate Winslet would sort of split the bodice movie roles. So she was in Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, and she was in lots of period pieces. So it was really cool. This was a stretch for her, I think, at the time. Or I mean, I don't think it was a stretch, because I think she's an amazing actor, so she could do whatever. But she hadn't been offered anything like this. So this kind of freed up her career a little bit. It gave her an opportunity to do something that she wasn't being allowed to do, which was play a modern person.
And she's so great.
Yeah.
Like, she's just so great in this. You can't, like, anytime she's on screen, like, you're just captivated by her.
This time I kind of felt like watching her she was my favorite person to watch. Like in previous viewings of the movie, I've been very taken by Brad Pitt, but this time, for whatever reason, I was just kind of more focused on her performance. I was really
Same.
enjoying it.
I felt the same.
So the next thing that happens is part of what Edward Norton's job is.
I don't know what the exact term is, but he works for like a major car company where they have to go and like assess like
He's a recall specialist,
Yeah.
is what they call it. He has to go and look at accidents,
Terrible accidents.
like all over the country, terrible accidents, car accidents specifically, take pictures, and he has to assess what happened at the accident and how much the car company was to blame. You know, this is this horrible scene where they're taking pictures of this burned car, but the guys, of course, who are doing the assessment are all calloused because
Yeah.
they've seen it a million times, and they're like, "Oh, look, the guy was fat. Look at his fat's all burned onto the steering wheel."
Right. And
stuff.
then like, oh, there's braces that are on the ashtray. This could be an anti-smoking ad.
Right,
Like it's
yeah.
just really harsh. Yeah.
But, you know, basically what he does is he determines whether it's worth it for them to recall the cars or not. So it's really cynical, horrible thing,
Well, and
which
he
I'm sure
has-
people really do for a living.
Yeah, and he has like he that scene when he's on the plane and he's telling his like the seatmate or whatever, like there's an actual, he's like explaining it to her, just breaking it down like it's no big deal, and there's an actual formula. So if this equals X, and she's just like, you see this woman's face and
Like,
she's
that's
just like
horrible.
horrified. She's like, what car company do you work for? And he's like, one of the big ones, a really big one. And she's just like, because it's pretty grim.
Another thing that is really great in this scene is he's sort of fantasizing about there being a plane crash. It's only for like, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds, but the plane crash that he fantasizes is shown on screen, and it's pretty intense. Like, it's a David Fincher plane crash, and as Jen knows, I am terrified of flying, though I do it. I suck it up and I do it, but I have a lot of flying anxiety. I tend to get into my head as to what's going to happen and how I'm going to horribly die in a plane crash. It was just like seeing what goes on in my head on screen.
Yep, exactly. I saw that and I was like, is this what you think about when we're in the air?
Yep, pretty much. But that we come right out of that, and he realizes he's sitting next to a person, and that person is Brad Pitt as Tyler Durden.
And he also, there was a little montage before that where he's talking about his traveling and being on a plane, and everything's like a single serving.
Right.
So you have like you're having a coffee and you have a single serving creamer, you have a single serving sugar. You're at the hotel and you have like these single serving shampoos, and
Yeah.
just like how, and then like, he's, and which is totally true. Like there's like a shrink wrap, not shrink wrap, but like wrapped in plastic, one Q-tip, like just, it's, everything is so just like, it's just for one use. It's so disposable. So he's going through this whole thing. And then we cut to his new seat passenger, because we have the whole montage of him just waking up in planes. He's in different time zones, different cities, just like what it's like to just travel so much and just kind of live this single serving lifestyle, so to speak. So then all of a sudden Brad Pitt's there and he tries to strike up his normal like seatmate chat. And Brad Pitt's like not having it. He's like, oh, because he's like, so what do you do? And he was like, what? And Brad Pitt's like, what do you mean? He's like, for a living. And he's like, oh, and Brad Pitt's like, oh, so you're going to pretend like you care what I do for a living or whatever, and like, and then he busts out, they have the same briefcase. And then he brings up the briefcase and he opens it up, and it's soap. It's Handmade Soap Company. And so he, Brad Pitt's doing his thing and just being very interesting. And Edward Norton's like, wow, you're the most interesting single service friend I've ever met. And Brad Pitt just kind of looks at him. He's like, you get it? Because he was like, oh no, I get it. He's like, you're really clever. Is that what you want to be, clever?
No, he says, how's that working out?
How's that
for
working
you?
out for you?
Which became sort of a catchphrase.
Yeah,
Like that.
it
I
did.
feel like we say that's a thing that people say a lot. Like, how's that working out
Yep.
for you? I think Fight Club is where it really
I think it
caught on.
Caught on big time.
Yeah, and it should be said, I mean, a couple of things. The soap element is going to be very important.
Yep.
The fact that he makes soap. It was also in a lot of the promotional materials
Yep.
that you'd see Fight Club carved onto a soap,
A
a
bar
bar
of
soap.
soap. Yep.
And Brad Pitt in this movie, first of all, his wardrobe is amazing.
Yeah.
And I kind of dressed a little bit like that in the 90s. Like I would wear plaid pants and hideous like pattern shirts and stuff. So when I saw this movie, I was kind of like, Brad Pitt felt like the coolest version of me that I could have imagined. He is very cool in this, and it makes sense because that's what he ends up
Yeah,
becoming, a
representing.
manifestation of that. I love his hair in it. It's really good. He's got really good spiky hair. This may be one of Brad Pitt's defining roles. I think it's more. I'd say more so than even Seven or something like that. The Tyler Durden role, I think, really kind of puts a stamp on. This is one of the big moments in his career,
Yeah.
and it's a really, really good performance. He's really charismatic. You really want to pay attention to him. His abs are insane.
Yeah.
Like, he's got these abs that are like, I don't even know how to describe them. They don't look real. They look like they're machine,
He's
like,
so
or something.
cut and also super tan.
Yeah.
Too. Like, it makes sense as to later because it's like, of course he's going to be like this perfection. He's kind of like got this like Greek god type body going on or something. It's, like it's to an extreme, but probably has, never done a sit up in his life.
Right.
He just is that way.
Yes.
And he's so, it just like defines giving zero fucks about anything. And it's just really baffling to Edward Norton's character. Like, he's just like, it's like he's mesmerized by him, but also just like, what, like, it's that thing where it's like that person's really exciting, but also scary.
Yeah.
Because then when they've landed and they're at the airport and we see Edward Norton like struggling trying to find his suitcase, which has been confiscated because it was vibrating.
It was vibrating.
Yeah. And so they're having this whole like weird conversation with the guy at the baggage claim who's like, yeah, well, when, ticking isn't a problem, but if it's vibrating, that really is upsetting to the throwers. Like, it's a real flag. And he's like, the throwers? He's like, oh, the baggage handlers, it's just this whole like thing. And then in the background, like we see, Edward Norton look over and there's Brad Pitt's character like hopping into this red like sports car and like taking off. And you're just like, wow, what a cool guy. And then you see like this man running behind, like, because his car's been stolen.
Yeah.
Which it's great. It's just, defining who this guy is.
So, yeah, the next thing that happens is Ed Norton goes home to his fancy condo in a high rise. But when he gets there, it has been blown up and all of his stuff is everywhere. His yin yang coffee table is out on the street. His refrigerator, which only has condiments in it, has been blown out into the street. And he's like, oh, this is really embarrassing. So he's got nowhere to stay. He goes and he almost calls Marla because she gave him her number.
Well, and that's like one of the things that like he sees as he's like looking around at the wreckage of his apartment is like this charred number from Marla or whatever. It's like a piece of paper that's singed. And also something to note here too is, which I kind of had forgotten this because it's been a long time since, like I said, I've watched it full on. Yeah, it's just his condo. It's only his condo, like which is important later. Yes. But for some reason, I forgotten that. I was thinking like it was just an accident for the whole building. I'm like, no, it's just his.
So he's got nowhere to go. So he calls Brad Pitt, or he calls Tyler Durden, and Tyler basically invites him out for a beer. So they hang out and they're having a beer, and Tyler's kind of giving him his philosophy on life, which is basically you're not your stuff and we're programmed to want to buy shit. Basically tearing down Edward Norton's sort of materialistic outlook. It's basically giving us our first taste of Tyler Durden's anti-materialistic, anti-capitalistic worldview. And obviously this is something that's very kind of attractive to our narrator at this point. So they have this exchange. They go outside the bar and Tyler's like, come on, man, just say it. Go on, just say it. And Edward Norton's like, what do you mean? He's like, you came here to ask me for a place to stay, so just go ahead and ask me.
Well, he comes out of the bar and he says, he's like, thanks for the beer. He's like, I guess I need to find a hotel. And that's when, Brad Pitt's like, get over with these like polite, these social like conventions,
Yes.
you know, like because that's what he's saying earlier with like, yep, so your stuff isn't you, like you're free now, you don't have any stuff, you know, and it's like, yeah, don't beat around the bush and hem haw, you know, and wait, because that's what we do.
Yes.
You know, it's like we're not being direct. A lot of times that's how we, you know, it's a manipulation of sorts, you know, and he's, you know, he's not wrong. I mean, I think a lot of things that he believes aren't actually wrong, you know, at all. And it's like, you know, if we did just say how we feel or ask for what we want, like it would be a lot easier. And especially it's interesting too, because talking more about dealing with masculinity and things like that, like it is kind of more expected for men to be more direct too, like that, you know, it's like, it's kind of more traditional that females might be a little more coy, so to speak. I don't know if that's even the right way to describe it, but not so direct in asking for what they want, traditionally at least. So, you know, it's interesting because this is such a window into like dealing with male issues.
Yeah.
Like that's also, you know, that he's kind of acting more female in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's intentional.
Yeah,
You know, like
no.
it's kind of addressing the female side to masculinity, and
That comes up again later between the two characters, not to jump ahead, but you know, they're talking about like having dads that had left and being raised by women. And this is again like such a Gen X type thing, you know, like we're the generation that like latchkey kids, divorce, like that's us.
And yeah, and I mean, I was mostly raised by a woman, and you know, yeah, it's true. It's a true aspect of our generation that a lot of men were raised almost primarily by women. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It is a good thing, but it does
has
influence
an effect.
things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, the main thing that sort of happens in this scene is after Edward Norton accepts Tyler's offer of going to his place, Tyler says, "I want you to hit me." And this, you know, this is a line that I used to see a lot in like trailers for the movie. Yeah. And Edward Norton's like, "What? What are you talking about?" I don't know. He's like, "No, I want you to hit me as hard as you can." So he keeps, you know, they keep going back and forth, and then eventually Ed Norton does hit him. He hits him in the ear. And Brad Pitt's like, ow, you hit me in the ear. And then he hits Edward Norton back, and they just basically start fighting, you know, not antagonistically, but it's almost like, I don't know, sex or something.
It's like sex or a dance or something. It's like, it's like,
it's an expression of male emotion.
Yeah.
And the most raw and, you know, primal thing two men can do to each other is to fight, really.
Aside from having sex, because it does feel very sexual too.
It definitely does, for sure. But I do think there's, going back to caveman times, you know, men just fought each other.
Yeah.
Over, you know, their families, over women, over territory, over food, over everything. It was it's in the male nature to fight other males. So that's obviously, you know, what they're getting at here. Yeah, so they just start fighting in this parking lot, and then some other guys come out and see them fighting, and, you know, they sort of gather around and stuff and kind of watch them fight. And it's just this, you know, this catalyst moment of two men fighting in a parking lot that's going to sort of set in motion the rest of the story.
Which is also like, and I was thinking about this watching it today too, is when the men come out to watch, it's like, it's such, again, like such an instinctive primal thing, because I mean, the last time I've seen a fight was in like high school.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was like always like, then there's like a crowd around, like it's just, you know, or like maybe at a party or something. But again, like, you know, in my early 20s or late teens or something like that. But it's such a thing that like is so in our DNA in some way to like, you know, just like we have to watch this, you know.
We have boxing and
stuff, and
you know,
MMA. I mean, obviously, it's
we like to watch people fight.
But after they are done fighting, and then they're like kind of just sitting on the curb, and you know they're having a beer, and he's like, "Oh yeah, let's, you know, can't wait to do that again." Type thing.
We should do this again.
We should do this again is what the line is. Yeah, and I feel like the characters really feel alive.
Yes.
And I was thinking about that, and not that, I mean, I'm no bruiser, but I know like sometimes when I've gotten injured, it's like that pain from that is like, well, you definitely feel alive.
Yep.
You know, it's like there's really, it's tapping into something there.
For sure. Yeah, and doing something like fighting makes you feel in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing else going on in your life when you're taking a punch from another dude.
Yeah.
Like you're not thinking about any money problems
Nope.
or anything like that. You're just thinking about the fact that you're getting punched. So, yeah, it's one of those things. There aren't many things in life that make you truly live in the moment, but fighting is definitely one of them.
Yep.
So after that, they go home to Brad's house, which is in the grungiest part of town. It's this big house that looks like it's about to be knocked down or condemned. This is some pretty primo production design.
Oh, yeah.
The house just looks like so gross inside and dilapidated. And
just I mean,
the walls are peeling.
Just the smell in there, it's like, it's this house that's like, it's in like a kind of an industrial area. Like there's no other, like, it's just it's like, obviously they knocked whatever, if there were houses down there before, everything's been long gone and it's industrial except for this one, which was probably beautiful at one time, like this kind of giant Victorian kind of looking, dilapidated, wet, like just so much standing water in the basement, like ankle deep. And like, they're talking about like the somehow there's electricity running and the water's like gross, but like if they turn on one light, then the other light has to go out. And then like if it's raining, they have to go and like cut the circuit. So, because obviously they're all going to die. But yeah, everything's just damp. And there had been like, the person who lived there before had been like a shut-in or a hoarder, and so there's like all these like magazines and books and stuff that are just wet and gross.
Yeah,
it just makes you. And then like Brad Pitt Tyler takes him upstairs, and he's like, "You're gonna sleep in here." It's like this gross mattress, like just it's so far from his like
cushy
condo, or even a hotel where he's been staying, for work or whatever. It's just like, he's kind of just like, okay.
Yeah, that's what I like about the scene is the way that Edward Norton plays it. He's kind of, it's gross and everything, but he's like, all right. Yeah. Like you can tell he's kind of totally into it. Like this actually seems like a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the way that's played. Like he's not horrified. He's totally like, all right. Yeah. Okay.
He just kind of sits down on this springy, gross, stained mattress. That's like, that's it. And he's just like, okay.
Yeah.
The next scene we have is Ed Norton kind of trying to get ready to go back to his like straight-laced job, getting ready in this dilapidated house with like the brown water, and like, he tries to go take a shower and it's just like dust comes out, and he's trying to like brush his teeth and stuff and just kind of make himself somewhat presentable to go back to this like corporate job. Plus he's like all beaten up too. Like he looks like he got in a fight because that's what he did.
And this is basically setting up a little thread that'll carry on throughout the rest of the movie, just that he's becoming less and less invested in the, straight world. And it's becoming more and more obvious to everyone around him that he is involved in some kind of weirdness.
Yeah.
And, because he's always bruised and bloody, he starts to just not wear a tie, and he starts smoking at his job and everything.
And like having blood on him sometimes at work. Like even one scene, I think a coworker, or maybe it's his boss, I can't remember, is like, is that your blood?
Well, and the reason that this is happening is because he and Tyler, Brad Pitt, decide to start a little club.
Yep.
And the club meets in this bar, in the basement of this bar that's near the house. And there's a pretty cool scene where they walk into the bar and it's done to a Tom Waits song. Anyway, they come into the bar and then they go downstairs, and we get our, now all these other men have sort of, caught wind. They've, witnessed them fighting outside the bar, and they want in on this action. So they've begun Fight Club, the titular organization of the movie. So they're downstairs, and we get the famous scene where Brad Pitt addresses everybody, and he gives the rules of Fight Club. The first rule being, you don't talk about Fight Club. The second rule being, you don't talk about Fight Club. And then I forget some of the other
Third rule
rules.
is like, you have, if you're new, you have to fight, or like there's a whole other.
Yeah, there's a few other rules, but
But the main two are don't talk about this.
And Brad Pitt has also specifically given Edward Norton the same instructions about himself. He said, I don't want you to talk about me to other people.
Yes.
That'll be important later on.
It sure will.
But yeah, so, they're basically these groups of men that are just beating each other up one at a time in the basement of this club.
Beating each other up and then hugging it out.
Yes.
Like it's a new catharsis. It's the new, recovery group, so to speak. Like they're getting something out of it. Like everyone's, it's not malicious. Like they're just getting this release, and it's catching on. There's more and more people during this time. Now Ed Norton is like full on living with Tyler at this house. A couple things are going on. One is he's like getting calls from this detective.
Yes.
Who's investigating the arson that happened, and Tyler is kind of, acting fool in the background or whatever. And, Ed Norton's like telling him, shut up, and he's like, am I a suspect? And he's like, no. But the detective's like, no, but if, I wouldn't leave town anytime soon. And, he's talking about how the explosion happened.
Yes.
And what it was all made with like household items.
Right.
Which Tyler has also mentioned in one of his kind of rants talking about making soap, how, byproducts from soap and other household items, like you could make dynamite, you can make this and that and the other. So we're kind of setting some things up here.
Some seeds for what's going to happen.
Yes.
But we definitely get the sense that Tyler knows how to blow up things.
Yes.
And so it seems kind of a little suspect that the narrator's condo just happened to blow up and
with homemade items too. Yeah.
Also, what happens here is while they're just hanging out at the house, there is a phone call, and the phone call is from Marla.
Yep.
And she is wondering where the narrator has been, because he hasn't been at any of his meetings. And he's like, "Well, how would you know? We've split up all the meetings."
Right,
and
that
she's
was
like,
the point.
Right.
Yeah.
She's like, "Well, I cheated and I've gone to yours, and I know you haven't been there." She also has taken a bunch of pills.
Yeah, a bunch of Xanax.
Yeah. So she's like, it's not a real suicide attempt.
It's a cry for help.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, she's taken a bunch of pills just to kind of do something and maybe get his attention or something.
Or get somebody's attention, because even the police got called or something. Right. So I think she's just, I don't know. I don't think she's really suicidal.
Yeah.
She's just bored, probably.
Well, I mean, I think we're to assume that with the police coming, I think we're to assume that the narrator called the police.
Oh, okay.
Because it's made pretty clear throughout the movie, when people start to die, he doesn't want people to die.
Yeah.
He values human life. He doesn't want people to get killed. All the things that sort of set him off as we go all revolve around death.
It's true.
So that's when things go too far, is
Yeah.
when people die. So I think, obviously we're going to find out about Tyler and the narrator, but I think the narrator, we're to assume he called the police.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He didn't want her to die.
Yes.
So yeah, he gets this phone call, and then we sort of leave it at that, and then he goes to sleep.
We get the phone call, and Marla's is kind of going on, and Ed Norton, the narrator, is like so like not, it seems just kind of bored by all of this. So he doesn't want to hang up on her. Yeah. So he just puts the phone on the cradle, like, where it's, so she's still just talking, but yeah, he goes to bed. Like, yes. I think thinking that, like, as long as she has someone to talk to, she'll stay awake, or she'll be okay. Or like, maybe he doesn't fully care. I don't know. Whatever. But he goes to bed. What we find out is that Tyler comes in.
Well, he goes to bed and he has this really stylized sex dreams of having sex with Marla.
That's right.
Where it's done in this kind of like almost bullet timey
CG
look scene where, they're having sex, but it's all very like abstract and stuff.
It's a cool scene.
So he's dreaming he's having sex with her, but then he wakes up and he hears people actually having sex. and it's Tyler having sex.
Right. Yeah, because he wakes up and Tyler's door is closed.
Yes.
And he's like, Tyler's door has never been closed since I've been living here. Like, that's weird. And he goes downstairs and is like eating breakfast. And then Marla shows up in the kitchen.
And he also sees like
Gross
a ton
condoms.
of condoms in
the toilet.
Yeah.
It's so gross. Yeah.
So, yeah, then Marla shows up in the kitchen and they have this sort of weird exchange.
Well, because he's like, what are you doing here? You know, like, how did you get in my house? What are you doing in my house? You know, and she's like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
You know, which should sort of be a tip off of what's going on.
But it's also like she's such a strange character anyway, you
Right.
know, and it's just, yeah.
Well, they've calibrated things really well so that you don't ask questions that you should be asking. But yeah, he's basically like, what are you doing here? And she's like, what are you talking about? And so she gets kind of pissed and leaves. And then Tyler shows up and he's like, man, you've got some freaky friends. Yeah. And then we get this explanation, like he picked up the phone after the narrator left. He started talking to her, presumably.
Yeah.
Then he goes to her apartment.
Yeah.
He gets her out of the apartment and the police come and they sort of run off together. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that's sort of the explanation we were given as to how they've hooked up.
Yeah.
But Tyler is very sort of dismissive of her. The whole Marla thing is an interesting aspect of the movie because it's hard to sort of understand what the real feeling for her is. I think we kind of understand it by the end of the movie. But both of the characters, and I think this is maybe something people would struggle with now, both the characters are dismissive of her. Tyler is just like, oh, she's freaky, you know, I like having sex with her or whatever, but you don't want to get involved with a woman like that or whatever. And Edward Norton doesn't seem to have any, you know, he feels that she's a nuisance. But like, obviously, he's drawn to her, but nobody has any real genuine affection for Marla. Neither character does, at least not in the beginning. So it's a little bit of a strange dynamic.
And I mean, it also seems like it's coming that way from Marla at first too, because like she's like a little like, you know, she's such a strange bird anyway. It seems like these are type of relationships that she would probably get into anyway, like with people who were emotionally unavailable or whatever. Like this is kind of based on who her character is. This is par for the course is how it feels. And, you know, it's not until later when she like, I mean, because the montage goes on, it's like this full on, and the only way you can describe it is fuck fest that's going on between Marla and Tyler, and the narrator, Ed Norton, is just so over it.
He's so annoyed by it.
Irritated by it. It's like, it's really loud, and like the ceiling, because it's this, you know, this building that's gonna fall apart, like ceiling is falling on his head, like when he's doing crunches and stuff, and
it's comically loud.
It's comically loud.
Like Brad Pitt and Helena Bonham Carter are really probably having fun pretending to have sex,
being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it's cartoonish. So later, like I think it's a scene where the narrator is at work. He gets a phone call from Marla, and it's having like a weird exchange with his boss then anyway, because his boss is kind of like, I think that's when he might say like, is that your blood on your shirt? And the boss has also found the manifesto on the copier, because Ed Norton is just getting sloppier and sloppier at work. He doesn't care. Like you said, he's smoking. He's like not wearing a tie anymore. He's like disheveled and beat up, and he's just barely like showing up. And he has this inner dialogue because his boss is like, is this yours? He's like, the first rule of Fight Club. And he's like reading off the rules. And Ed Norton's like, oh shit, you know, I must have been asleep and left it on the copier or whatever. And then he gets a phone call, and it's Marla. And Marla's like, my tit's gonna rot off. You know, she's having like a breast cancer scare.
Yeah.
So she asks if he'll come over and like help her out, you know, and do like a self-exam.
And one thing we should note that we didn't make note of is a lot of what we understand of the narrator is told to us through voiceover.
Yes.
So we're hearing a lot of his thoughts because we're hearing Ed Norton explain it to us in voiceover.
Exactly.
But yeah, so she is having this breast cancer scare, and so he goes over to her apartment to feel her breast. It's this sort of strange scene where he's like, why is she calling me to do this? And he comes over and begrudgingly checks out her breast, and then he's like, are we done here? And she's like, I guess we're done here, or whatever.
Yeah, and it's really like she's doing a thing that it's kind of like when you're hooking up with somebody and you don't really know what's going on, and it's like, you're kind of like trying to have a reason for them to come over and like have some sort of intimacy, which isn't even like, it's such a non-sexual scene. I mean, it's very clinical, or he's just like being it's kind of like having a friend just help you out with that. It's not like, hot in any way, but it's like you're trying to like force this like intimacy, or like that there is some sort of connection or something, which is like, he's completely like, why like, I'm not the one that's sleeping with you.
So while all this is going on, Fight Club is growing bigger and bigger. We're getting some new character actors in the mix. Holt McClaney,
yes,
who we spoke about last podcast.
We love him.
Jared Leto is in here. Meatloaf ends up coming into the group. Bob is inducted into the group. And we're also getting sort of a glimpse of what Tyler does when he's not doing Fight Club. He's got a few jobs. One of them is he's a projectionist at a movie theater, and he has a little hobby of projecting frames of pornography into the reels. Back in the olden times, we used to view movies on film, and the films needed to be you'd have to have somebody actually present in the projection booth. Now you just turn a button on.
Right.
But kids these days don't remember what it was like. I actually worked at a movie theater, so I
during this time.
Yes, I knew projectionists, and I would hang out sometimes in the projection room and watch them switch reels, and they'd be on these giant platters.
I think it's cool.
It is cool.
I've seen it too. Yeah.
And they explain that there used to be these little things called cigarette burns that you'd see in the corner of the reel when it would happen. But yeah, so whenever they'd show family movies, he'd splice in like a penis or a piece of porn. In it. And so in these little subliminal flashes, we get them in the actual movie itself that we're watching.
Yes.
Fincher uses that as a sort of gimmick.
Yes.
He also is
he works as a banquet caterer.
Caterer, and he does horrible things.
Things. He's they call him a food assassin or something like that.
He pees in the chowder and stuff like
other
that.
Gross things.
Sneezes and things, which I also worked at Fenway Park. And I worked at the pizza stand, and some of my coworkers would sneeze into the pizza sauce. So that definitely happens. And try not to think about it whenever you eat
try
somewhere.
Not to think about that at all.
It definitely happens.
The other thing that he does, which we established back on the plane, is he makes soap.
Right.
So we get this also great scene of he's like, all this is going on with Fight Club and this and that. And then like Tyler says to Ed Norton, like, now we got to make soap. So they, start making soap. And I think this is first when the burn happens, because he's got he's talking about the ingredients of soap and telling him this whole story about how man learned to use soap, and that it was because they would have human sacrifices up on a hill and then burn the bodies, and then the ash would like roll down into the stream, and then the fat from the bodies, like the burnt fat or whatever, with the water was making like a lather. So that's how man learned how to like wash their clothes in the stream. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it sounds right. I mean, I believe it. So he's telling him all this as he like puts, I think it's a lye on his skin, or like some sort of a lye, a powdered form of lye or something, on whatever. But he puts this on the narrator's hand, and is holding his hand and not letting him go, as this is like burning the shit out of his hand. And he's like, having this whole like dialogue about like, because the narrator is going to, from all of his self-help groups, He like a lot of them ended with guided meditation. So he would go to his cave,
Yeah.
where it's like this visual where we're seeing him like in this like kind of icy Arctic looking cave where like, you know, at one point he sees a penguin, and then like now he's seeing Marla, and, you know, he's trying to go to all these like happy places where, you know, transcendental meditation like takes you out of whatever pain you're in, because that's what, and then like, you know, Tyler's like, no, you got to stay with it. Don't leave. This is like, you're the most alive you've ever been, and all this stuff. And then finally, you know, he lets go and lets that happen. And then Tyler pours some vinegar on his hand, which, you know, stops the burning. So that whole thing happens. Then they proceed to go get some fat.
Yes.
And I had forgotten about this, and wow.
To your point about how soap was originally discovered from human fat, they go to a hospital and a liposuction clinic and they go to the dumpster and they pull out giant bags of fat that has been sucked out of people to use for their soap. And one of the bags gets caught on the
barbed wire fence.
And spills all over the place.
It's so gross. It's their dumpster diving for like bags of like hazmat sealed or whatever, like they're toxic, like they're, you know, they're medical sealed bags of the grossest. And it's like, I mean, I am a weirdo who likes to watch surgery and stuff, or I shouldn't say likes to. I haven't done it. You only need to do it.
Just say you like to.
I like to watch pimple popping and things like that regularly, but you only need to watch the fat surgery once. But it's a real visual that you'll never forget. It's kind of burned into your retinas, and boy, does David Fincher do a good job of capturing it, because that's what it looks. It's so nasty. It's so gross. So then they make off with the fat that they've stolen from the lipo clinic, make this soap, and then cut to they're at like this fancy department store where Tyler is able to sell to the store like for $20 a bar.
Yeah.
And, you know, they kind of make a joke, or the narrator is like, yeah, so, you know, and who knows what the store is upcharging. So he's like, these women who have paid to have the fat sucked out, you know, paid thousands of dollars to have liposuction, are now like buying their own fat back at like, you know, top dollar.
So basically what starts to happen at this point is Fight Club becomes more and more of sort of almost like a paramilitary organization. Tyler is basically recruiting people, and so hopefuls will have to come to the house and stand out on the porch for 3 days. They do sort of drill sergeant style, berate them. You're too old. The first person is a kid, and they're like, you're too young. Then the next person is Meatloaf, and they're like, you're too fat and old. Get out of here. So basically, they're forming a sort of terrorist cell or a militia organization, or whatever you call it. This is another thing that's probably a little uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
Because these are the people that you're supposed to be sort of relating to. Although, in fairness to the movie, Edward Norton never seems to be really on board with it.
No, Edward Norton is like, it's like that thing where you're like, you know, having a good time with certain things, and you're like, you're okay with what's going on, and then all of a sudden it's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, no, I didn't, you know, because they're doing things at first that are like, it's kind of like Merry Prankster type things.
Yeah.
You know,
well, the first thing they do that is shown in the movie is they put a big smiley face on an office building. Like a bunch of the guys have been sort of recruited, and they're all gathering around the TV or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, like look what we did. And it's, you know, basically they've blown up a couple of windows and then put a big smiley face on the side of the building.
Which at that point, I mean, that's kind of like they were doing other things before that, like where they were having to try to like start fights with other people. Like Tyler starts giving people homework assignments.
Right.
This is kind of sorry, we're a little bit out of order, but it like that was kind of what started before. Like they started having people come military style, like living at the compound where like they built bunk beds and all of that stuff.
Telling them to start fights with people in the street, which is just for no reason.
Hilarious, because it's like,
and then lose. You have to lose. You have to start a fight and then lose.
Yes. And it's like, it's so true, because it's like they're showing the lengths, and the narrator's talking about the lengths that people will go to not to get into a fight.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true.
My favorite is Holt McClaney with the hose.
Yeah.
He's like a mechanic or something.
Yeah.
He's just standing outside the garage where he works with a hose, and he keeps just shooting people who walk by, and they're like, fuck you or whatever. He just keeps shooting them with a hose and trying to get them to fight him. That was my favorite one.
It's that one is the best. And then also he does that with a priest, where he's like hosing down the priest and then like hosing down his Bible and stuff too. And then there's like a guy at like a Cadillac dealership or something that like, he's trying to start, like they're trying to start a fight with him too. And it's just, and then they were having like they fed the pigeons a bunch of food, so they pooed all over the cars. No, I remember this is like when I was going to community college. I think it was, I was taking, or no, I might have been at university. I don't know, whatever. I was taking a some sort of psychology class, and we're studying like deviant behavior, and we had to like do something kind of like this in society. Nothing that would be harmful, but that would cause some sort of upset.
Reaction.
Yes. Yeah. And what I ended up doing is my mom was still working at the time at an elementary school, and the kids were having their like big kickball game, and I interrupted their game. Like I went and stole the ball and just ran off the field.
Okay, yeah.
And it was so uncomfortable to do that. And they like just like didn't know what to do. And then like then they all started chasing me or whatever. But it was like everyone was just in shock because I'm an adult. I was probably in my early 20s, I guess. And yeah, it was, anyway, it just kind of reminded me of that, because it's like, it's the people, I mean, you see this stuff in YouTube videos now and stuff too, where people are kind of pulling.
I feel like in a weird way, we've become more accustomed to that.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, one of the reasons is because there are so many mentally ill people on the street, so our lives are often disrupted by them.
Yes.
But I do. I feel like because of YouTube videos and like Jackass,
totally
and shit
Jackass,
like that, it's kind of like we've gotten more
punked or
it's
something
not
like
so
that.
like if you see somebody doing something who's not obviously mentally ill, if you see somebody doing something like that now, you just assume they're like YouTube pranksters.
Oh
or
no,
something
or especially
like that.
Living in LA.
Yeah.
Like, we would assume that it's some sort of, it's a prankster or some sort of filmings going on or something like that. It's not, but back then, this was in the 90s, it was more like, whoa.
It would be more shocking.
Yeah.
Back then.
So yeah, we're getting the whole montage of that with they're giving out assignments and stuff, but the narrator like knows Tyler's doing this, but he's not really like in the know of what's going on.
Yeah.
And
he
so
feels like he's being left out of, and it becomes,
a
Fight
thing.
Club evolves into Project Mayhem.
So when you're talking about when he comes in to see everybody who's like, they're like, we're celebrating, they all have beers, and Tyler's like kind of covered in paint.
Yeah.
And it's because of the, like you said, the news report where they've like painted the smiley face and blown out some windows, and they're all like cheering. The narrator doesn't know anything about it. And so he's like, wait, you guys can't do this. And, he's like having a reaction, and everyone's just kind of looking at him.
Right. Like, what do you mean?
And he's just like really he's in his feelings, like feeling out of the loop with Tyler. Like Tyler's not sharing this with him. And Tyler's like, well, you didn't want to be like, your level of involvement is what it is, you know? And so they're having this whole like kind of argument about communication and like what his level of involvement is with the project and this and that. So it's kind of becoming a thing.
And so one of the ways that they are able to sort of fund these activities is basically Ed Norton basically doesn't want to have to work anymore. So he's going after his boss, who he really doesn't like, and he goes into his office and is like, we've got to talk. And he basically tries to blackmail him. He says, I want you to pay me my salary and have me stay home and collect a paycheck. And as long as you do that, I won't like tell the media or whoever like the way that we know these cars I'm inspecting are dangerous and all of that. But that doesn't really fly. The boss isn't buying that line of things. And he's like, no, get the hell out of here. Yeah. So Ed Norton beats himself up in the office. And, we see him like throwing himself onto it, like smashing onto a glass coffee table, smashing into the wall, into the shelves and everything. Totally beating the shit out of himself.
And he's really good at this.
He's really good at it.
It's almost like
he's done
maybe
this before.
He did it before?
Yes.
I don't know.
The security gets called in, and he's framed it in such a way that it looks like the boss has been beating him up. And so he gets what he wants. He gets to be paid his salary. Plus he gets all this like computer equipment and all sorts of extra
Oh, yeah.
goodies. And, so that's sort of how this burgeoning,
Terrorist organization.
terrorist organization is getting some of the equipment and money that they need.
Something else that didn't really age well either was when he is talking to his boss earlier when Marla calls.
Mm-hmm.
He's threatening his boss back then, and he's like, I might come in, somebody might come into the office with
whoever left this manifesto around
Right.
is probably a really dangerous person, and they might come in here with an AR-15,
Yeah.
which is the kind of
Armalite
gun
rifle,
that people do this with.
Yes.
Yeah, that part actually made me
like kind of ill, like, because it was like, this was before all of this. This was before Columbine even,
It was
I think.
at the same time.
Oh, it was, I guess it was a little after, because I think
was
Columbine
after.
was like in April,
It was
and
in
this
April.
came
This
out in
was
the summertime.
fall, late summer. I
Yeah,
think.
that might be. Anyway, but that kind of made me feel a little, because we've just dealt with so many horrible, tragic shootings. So many since then, like in the past 22 years.
Yeah.
It's just, So that made me like, I was like, this definitely did not age well.
Nope.
This was not good. Back to where you were, that, he ends up getting to leave with a year's salary. They said 52 weeks of pay, plus all the computer equipment or whatever. And that's what's going to fund this Project Mayhem.
Yes.
We kind of see the narrator like sleeping, waking up, walking through the house, and seeing like this crazy operation going on. Like they're like, have like a garden going on in the back, but like also at first it looked like they were just kind of cleaning up the place, but now they like have all like the soap supplies out and stuff, and now it looks like they might be making bombs or something. Like but he's kind of like, he's really out of the loop.
Yes.
Like, and he's becoming resentful and also fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of the people who's not out of the loop is Jared Leto's character.
Not. He is in the loop.
He's in the loop, and he's got like dyed blonde hair and dyed eyebrows. His appearance is ridiculous.
Yeah.
In this. Yeah. Jared Leto's character sort of becomes the focus of the narrator's resentment. And he's, really pretty because he's Jared Leto.
I think his character name, which I don't even remember, but I saw it in the credits, is something like Angel Face or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not given a name.
No,
in
but
the
that's
movie,
but that's what's in the credit. Yeah, hardly anyone really has a name other than like Bob and Tyler.
Yeah.
Really. Like,
and Marla.
But the next thing is, that's already bubbling up between Jared Leto and Ed Norton. Narrator's getting very jealous about that. They have this thing where they're all dressed as like banquet cater waiters.
Yeah.
Because that's what Tyler does for a living. And they're having it's a thing that the police chief or somebody, they've created this like
they were going to go after a task force to go after Project Mayhem. And they're doing it in this sort of banquet hall kind of like press conference-y type of thing. And so Project Mayhem is disguised as the waiters and everything at this event. And
they all have these ridiculous wigs on because they've shaved their heads.
Yes.
So they have like these black, like big wigs on. And it's the guy who is heading up the project says, I got to go take a piss.
Yeah.
And so he steps away from this whole function, and then.
Yeah. And so they all attack him in the bathroom, and they hold him down, and they tell him that they're going to cut off his balls with a knife.
Yeah.
And,
big knife.
Yeah, big knife.
It's a big pivotal scene because we have Tyler is like in his face. Everyone is wearing like ski masks.
Yeah.
Except for Tyler and the narrator, who didn't know this was like how this was going to play out. Like the narrator's in the bathroom too. Ed Norton is, and he's like kind of watching this horrified. Yeah. But we're getting like this really interesting shot of the guy who's like on the floor, and all the dudes are gathered around with their masks.
Yeah.
Except for Brad Pitt. Tyler, who's like in his face and telling him, like, you're going to see like his chipped tooth and stuff. Like it's a very close up shot. And he's just like, here's the deal. Like, call off this task force or we're going to like take your balls right now.
Well, and it's like, and we're everywhere. Yeah. We're the people serving your food.
Exactly.
We're the people connecting your calls.
Connecting your calls, cutting your lawn, whatever. Like we're
everywhere and we're going to get you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they take off. This is where, so they head out of the hotel or wherever they're having the banquet. I think it was a hotel. And they're like in this alley and they scatter. And Jared Leto's character is kind of like, Tyler kind of has him go like do something, like has him kind of like heading up. And you see like the narrator, Ed Norton again, is just like, you know, like kind of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And he like runs off with Tyler. But it's like, there's been kind of an ongoing thing too, where he's starting to realize where he's running into people who know about Fight Club, who are like talking all about Tyler all the time. And it's all, and he's like having that thing where he's like, you know, he has words with Tyler later. He's like, we did this together. We started this together.
Yeah.
You know, and Tyler's like, yeah, but you didn't want to have, you know, that much involvement or whatever. But everyone knows about Tyler Durden, and like no one really knows about the narrator. And he's starting to have feelings about that. Yeah. And then with Jared Leto, he's got a whole other jelly thing going on.
So that ends up, you know, because of Jared Leto's favoritism, that ends up in this scene where they're back at the basement of the bar, and the narrator decides he's going to take out his aggressions on Angel Face, and he beats the living crap out of him. I mean, he just, and it's some serious like blood makeup. I noticed that the makeup effects were done by Rob Bottin.
Yes.
I didn't realize that before.
I didn't either, but I saw it in the credits this time. Yeah.
He did The Thing and a lot of really classic
really
80s
good effects
stuff. But yeah, he just beats the living shit out of Angel Face so bad that he basically has to go to the hospital. And then afterwards, he walks over to Tyler, and Tyler's like, what was that all about? And he's like, I just wanted to destroy something beautiful.
It's such good effects. It's so, I mean, we just get a quick cut to Jared Leto's face.
Yeah.
And he's got like one tooth left.
Yeah.
And his whole face looks like it's been like pounded with a meat cleaver or something, like pulverized.
If you're not a Jared Leto fan and you haven't seen this movie, you owe it to yourself to watch him get the shit kicked out of him by Edward Norton. Like, if you've ever wanted to see Jared Leto get his face bashed in,
this is the film for you.
This is the film for you. So yeah, these Project Mayhem things have been escalating without the narrator's seeming involvement. We see him waking up and stuff, and then he finds out something crazy has happened, you know, which all ties into the theme of him not being able to sleep and blah blah blah. So he wakes up, and Project Mayhem has just attempted to do a pretty spectacular, I think,
actually pretty great.
It's a pretty great thing. Their assignment was to destroy a piece of corporate art and a coffee chain store at the same time. Well,
they decided they were going to kill two birds with one stone,
right?
Because they had it like it would have been fantastic had it not ended tragically,
right? But what they did was there's this big sort of circular piece of stupid corporate art in a plaza right next to like a Starbucks-ish type of place.
It looked like a giant pinball or something, like this big silver giant ball.
Yeah, and so they blow up the base of it so it goes rolling into the not really Starbucks.
But
or whatever.
Starbucks.
Yeah. And one of the Project Mayhem members who was doing this was our beloved Bob, and he gets shot and killed. And they bring his body back to the house, and it's like the whole back of his head.
They blew his head off.
Yeah, his brains like fall off into the floor.
It's really gruesome.
It's some pretty gruesome gore. And so at this point, the narrator freaks out.
Yeah.
Because somebody's dead now, and it's Bob, who he actually cares about. And so, yeah, this is now really like setting things off for him.
Yeah. He's so not okay with this. And then he's also just like Jared Leto, who we see now, who like his face like is just destroyed. Like actually like one half of his face is like still just completely mangled and puffy. And yeah, it's like, whoa, that's what he looks like now. He's still fully 100% in.
Yeah.
And he's just like, we need to take the body and bury it in the garden.
Yeah.
You know, we had to get rid of the evidence. And Holt McClaney too, we got to get rid of the evidence. And, you know, the narrator's like, he's not evidence. This is Bob. This is Robert Paulson. And they're like, sir, we're not supposed to have names in Project Mayhem.
Yeah.
And then like very cult-like, very, you know, organization-like, it's Holt McClaney
they draw their own conclusions as to what he's saying. They're like, I see. In death, we have a name.
Yeah.
his name was Robert Paulson.
His name was Robert Paulson.
Yeah,
and everyone's like chanting it. And the narrator's just like having this like moment.
Well, that's the moment where you know it's gotten out of
It's way out
control.
of hand. It's
like
way
now
out of hand.
there's a life to it. And this happens with cults when you watch this sort of behavior.
Because we have.
Right. Eventually the cult starts making up its own rules, even like without the leaders involved.
Oh, the leader's so like it's surpassed that person now. Like it's, and you know, I also feel like art is imitating itself in a sense of like what we were talking about earlier as to like what people liked about this film and like kind of got the like we're missing the point is like
similar to the Matrix. The Matrix has this same problem where people, the thing with the Matrix was same year and everything. The thing with the Matrix was the whole red pill blue pill thing. Like this is if you're only going to live in the Matrix, then you're not seeing the real reality. Like Fight Club has the same kind of problem where people took the wrong lesson.
They totally did. And you got all these bros that are like, you know, like.
It sucks because it sours the legacy of the movie.
Yes.
Like I know people who now don't like this movie because they don't like what grew out of it. You know, they feel like it's the movie's fault that this inspired people to be terrible.
And it's not. It's really not. It's not the movie's fault. It's not the book's fault at all. Like it's saying something completely
opposite.
Saying the opposite. It's saying the opposite.
Yes.
But people are seeing what they want to see. And it also was happening at this time when you had a lot of like these like rage bros who loved Rage Against the Machine.
Right.
And I was like, were you listening to the lyrics?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, this is not like, you're the machine, man. It's
they're
like,
raging against you, dumbass.
Yeah, but it's just they're getting the wrong thing out of it.
That's just how these things go.
I know.
And you can't blame the art. I'm sorry,
you can't blame the artist in this way. No, you can't. I think also just because of where things have gone over the past 22 years, I am watching this and I've seen this and I've read the book and it's just been a long time. I'm getting nervous because I'm like feeling like, oh no, this is just this.
You know, half the people that stormed the Capitol thought they were in Fight Club or something.
I know. Yeah, it's just making me really uncomfortable because things are out of hand. Like, and there's no putting the genie back in the bottle now because like these guys have this mob mentality of like what there's no stopping it. This is kind of like a deal breaker for the narrator.
Yes.
And this is like, I think as he starts kind of going around the house and seeing like stuff that's like, he doesn't know what's going on, but there's like obviously something that's being planned. And then like he's going through, because I think Tyler left.
Well, one of the things that happens next is we get the scene with the car.
Oh, yes.
So basically, this culminates in this scene where it's like pouring rain, and we've got the narrator and Tyler, and I think Holt McClaney, another one of the guys, are all in a car. And so Edward Norton is like confronting Tyler about how he's been out of the loop with Project Mayhem and how he hasn't been included in these things, and how they started Fight Club together. And Tyler's basically like, you don't want to know about any of this stuff. And while they're driving, like Tyler is just swerving into traffic and it's pouring rain and they're getting closer and closer to hitting stuff. And basically Tyler is like, you need to just let go or whatever. You need to stop trying to control everything. You need to just let go.
And literally Tyler is letting go of the steering wheel at this point. And also we have like the two recruits in the back that are just like, the first rule of Project Mayhem is you don't talk about Project Mayhem. You know, they're like, they're doing all this like cult reciting back what they've been told from Tyler or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a reoccurring theme that's going to continue on into the film, is like when, you know, the narrator is confused about something that's going on and they're like looking at him like, is this a test? You know, like, so that whole thing's happening. But yeah, so then the narrator's trying to grab the wheel and, you know, Tyler's like, no, you just got to let go. Just let go. And so then they let go and have a car crash.
Yeah. Have a big car crash.
Or they go tumbling down and the car's upside down and, you know, miraculously no one dies. They all get out of the car. But, and that's when Tyler says, you just had a near life experience.
Yeah. So this is sort of I think a catalytic moment because, you know, literally the narrator is forced to let go of the wheel, so to speak.
Yes.
What basically happens after that is he wakes up the next day at the house and Tyler has mysteriously gone.
I think everybody's gone. Like, I feel like he wakes up at the house and everybody's gone at that point.
Right.
Because this is after what happened with Bob.
Right.
So that house is empty. And so he's kind of running around and seeing like stuff on the wall that's related to Project Mayhem. And then he goes through Tyler's room.
Right. And in his room, he finds all these plane tickets, for all these flights Tyler's taken and all these places that he's gone. So he wants to find Tyler.
Yes.
So he figures he's going to be at one of these places. And so goes flying all around the country to these different places he's been.
Because he also has all these vouchers from when his job ended. They gave him a bunch of vouchers too to fly.
Yeah. And so he's going to these places and he notices that wherever he's going, there seems to be fight clubs. And so he goes into bars and he's asking if they've seen Tyler, and they're like, is this a test or whatever? And he's like, no, it's not a test. Where's Tyler? And there's like, well, I can't help you with that, sir.
And he feels like he's just like on the heels of Tyler everywhere he's going. Like
right
he feels like
him.
the fight has just happened. Like he's even like in the bar, like the basement of some bar. And he was like he could smell the sweat and the blood, and like the ground feels like it's warm. Like there was just a fight. Oh, and then he even goes to like this one restaurant or whatever, and he like in the kitchen, and the kitchen staff are like, his name is Robert Paulson. They're all like, so you're really having like this like, am I losing my mind type thing? Like, what is going on? Like, it's a Rosemary's Baby type, everyone's in on it type thing, And finally, this guy who's at the bar, who is in like one of those like
attraction
halo
or
something, like he's been beat to shit.
Yeah.
So, that's a big sign there, but it's like, he's just, got this whole like thing where he can barely turn his head. And the narrator's like, have you seen Tyler Durden? Da, 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 da. And the guy's like, again, is this a test? That's a done. He's like, well, you're Tyler Durden, or I'm seeing him right now or whatever. And just.
And so, I think that the line that Ed Norton gives is like, we've just lost cabin pressure or whatever. It's like the voiceover. Yes. So basically he goes back to his hotel room and is having this revelation that he's Tyler Durden and has always been Tyler Durden. And then Brad Pitt is there sitting in the hotel. He hears Brad Pitt's voice and he turns, and there's Brad Pitt now with a shaved head and like a fur coat or whatever. And he's sitting in the hotel room and he's like, yep, like I'm you basically. And so our big twist here is revealed that there has only ever been one person, Tyler Durden, who is the narrator.
Yes.
And Brad Pitt has been playing basically a figment of his imagination, this idealized version of what he wishes he could be, the person he wants himself to be.
Makes sense with the ridiculous abs and tan and like the flamboyant like cool clothes, and like it's like his like idea of what a man is, what is cool. He's also even before Brad Pitt shows up, he's like putting it all together. And like, when he had said to Marla had showed up actually at the house, like in the garden, and she's like, what is going on? Because there's like all these people here. This is like when Project Mayhem is like in full swing. And the narrator had woken up and he's like walking around with like a bottle of vodka or something and just like completely out of it. And he's just like, because he's never supposed to talk about Tyler, but at this point he doesn't give a fuck anymore because Tyler has disappeared. Right. And so he's like, Tyler's not here, Tyler's gone or whatever. And Marla's just like, you are a nutcase, like I can't deal with this. And so she says, but he's like kind of getting all this like flashback. And then also he's getting the flashback to like the first night beating himself up in the parking lot.
And we also should say part of the big revelation is he calls in the hotel room, he calls Marla and is like, have we ever had sex? And she's like, what do you mean? Have we had sex? You mean like, did we have sex or were we making love or whatever? And he's like, well, so then we've made love or whatever. And she's like, yeah, like
she's like, you're impossible,
and then she finally says his name, like, or whatever, like, yes, Tyler. And then he's like, say my name again. And she's like, Tyler Durden. Yeah. And that's when he says, we have just lost cabin pressure. That's when it's like, he is Tyler Durden. Yes. For sure.
Yeah. What you were saying about the phone calls is he's called Marla, but then when he goes to check out of the hotel, because he's like got to rush back home, the front desk clerk or whatever is like, oh, he's like, just bill me. And they're like, well, you need to sign for your phone calls. And he's got like between like 2 a.m. and 2:30, he made like a gazillion phone calls.
Right. So something big is going down.
Something's going down. And so he starts like calling these numbers when he gets back to the house, and he realizes they're related to properties, because it's like, 1600 Franklin. And then he looks up on the wall and there's like a manila folder with that and like a map and like, blueprints and all this stuff. And that keeps happening. So he's realizing.
And he realizes they're like financial buildings and
Yes.
stuff. So he puts it together what the plan is. Which, in reality, he knows what the plan is because it's his plan.
Right. But it's just like, I think this is also so like important in its own way, just because like when you have like a mental split like this, like you can, like it's a psychotic break when you have a form of schizophrenia kind of going on, or, that you've got like, you're kind of blacked out.
Yeah.
And doing all of this stuff, it's like being in a blackout.
Yeah.
And you're like, but wow, highly functional and doing all of these things that he really, honest to God, has no clue about, even though he's doing all of this. Like it's a terrifying thing. Like I think he really does a good job of showing like, oh my God, like what is happening? Like he's really piecing it together. And then like in a panic, he grabs all of this stuff and he goes to see Marla first.
Because he knows Marla's in danger,
Yes.
because he knows the rest of Project Mayhem. He's talked about Marla, about Tyler, which Tyler warned him to never talk about him to Marla, but he has. And so he's now fearing for her life. So he basically goes to her, and they have this crazy scene in a restaurant where he's, trying to explain to her without fully explaining, like, I know I must seem like two people or whatever. And she's like, are you kidding? You're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Jackass or whatever.
But also we should mention the restaurant staff are also part of Project Mayhem, because they're like, whatever you want, sir, it's on the house. And then he was like, don't do anything to the food. And they're like, then maybe she shouldn't get the clam chowder. Like it's like.
Yeah, so he basically like gets her a bus he like runs out in front of a bus and almost gets killed by it, and then gives her some
a wad
money.
Of cash and is like, get out of town, like go camping, get out of major cities, because he doesn't realize how far this is going to reach to, like, he only knows what's going on right here, but because this has turned into such a thing all over everywhere, like he's like, just go out to the woods.
And so what he does then is he goes to the police and he turns himself in, and he explains to them, I'm the head of this terrorist organization, and we're going to, it's gotten out of my control or whatever, and we're going to hit all these different financial, institutions all around the city. The city is never know what city it is. It looks like LA a lot of the time.
It could be whatever. But important fact is that when he goes to the police, he's talking to the detective who's been investigating the arson of his condo.
Yes.
So that detective is there, but then there's 3 other cops that are in the room.
Well, yeah, they pull him into like an interrogation room or whatever. And the detective is like, okay, well, this actually like checks out. So I'm going to go, whatever, make phone calls or whatever. He leaves him with these other 3 cops. And they turn out to be Project Mayhem members.
And they're like, sir, you told us this would happen. And if this happened, we have to take your balls.
Yeah. And he's like, he's trying to talk his way out of it. And everything he says, they're like, you told us you'd say that.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, but what about this? And like, no, you told us you'd say that too. And like, they grab him and like throw him down on a table. And they're going to cut off his balls. But he, manages to like grab a gun off of one of them. And this basically sets us off to our sort of final climax, where he's got a gun. He doesn't have his pants anymore.
Nope, he's in his boxers.
They've pulled his pants off because they're going to cut off his balls. He knows that one of the addresses is Franklin or something. Franklin. And so he goes to this office building basically, and like before he gets there, he's right outside the office building, and then Brad Pitt shows up again. He's basically trying to reckon with himself, essentially, to stop the building from being blown up.
Well, because also it's important, because you mentioned this earlier, because the narrator, which we now know is Tyler, right? Has always been Tyler, doesn't want anybody to die.
Yeah.
He's not. And so Brad Pitt, the other part of Tyler, is telling him, like, nobody's in the building. Like, we made sure it's an empty building, that there's no staff, there's no security there.
The staff was all, the security were all Project Mayhem. So they got everybody.
But they made sure that, like, it's just literally going to, it's not really that bad of a plan. It's
Nope.
going to like zero out debt for everybody because it's all these credit card buildings.
Yes.
Because it's going to be chaos and they're not going to be able to know who owes what.
I don't really think it would work that way, unfortunately.
I mean, maybe it could have back then.
Back then,
I don't know. Not
maybe.
now.
No,
but
the
I
internet
don't know.
was around. I don't think it would have worked.
Probably not. But,
For the movie, it's fine. So him and Tyler have this confrontation out in front of the building. Edward Norton tries to then Tyler's inside the building.
Yes.
He tries to shoot Tyler, but he's just a reflection in the thing. And then they have this knockdown, drag out fight. They basically go down to the parking garage.
Yes.
And it's and Brad Pitt is kicking the crap out of Ed Norton, and he's doing these karate type of.
But we're getting the circuit camera,
right?
Which again showing Ed Norton just beating himself up.
And here's where I have a problem. My only real problem with the whole he's both of these people at once is there's one shot where we see Tyler grab him by his shirt collar and drag him.
Yeah.
And then you see him in the reflection and you see him in the camera and he's being dragged by an invisible man or something.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
No,
there's no physical way to actually do that.
You can't drag yourself.
I mean, I think it's just kind of a joke.
Yeah.
It's like David Fincher making a joke. I know there's no way this could happen.
But I'm going to do it anyway.
I'm going to do it anyway because it's funny.
Yeah.
But they're having this knockdown, drag out fight in the car garage.
Right next to this van.
That's full of explosives.
Yes.
And so, eventually, despite the fact that he's getting his ass royally kicked by Brad Pitt, Ed Norton gets into the van and it's full of explosives. And there's a classic sort of scene where there's a detonator with all these wires in it. And he's which wire? Come on, Tyler, just tell me which wire to take out. He's I don't know.
He's you should know.
You should know.
Did it.
Yeah.
And he's you're the one that, and he was just so he's really trying to block Brad Pitt out. And
maybe I thought about the blue wire or the green wire all day or whatever, but that's not really the wrong one or whatever. But basically, Edward Norton ends up pulling the green wire, which is the right wire to disarm the detonator. The fun part of these scenes is this whole Brad Pitt being you should know. I'm you.
It's you.
Yeah,
you're the one.
Now we know I'm you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of sort of moments where he's come on, I'm you.
There's some good comical things
They're
happening
playing
here.
off the twist nicely here.
Yes.
They end up in this. Brad Pitt wants him to get a good view on what's happening.
Well, we go back to the very first scene because the narrator even says and now we're back to where we started because the Brad Pitt has gotten the gun from Ed Norton and he has the gun in his mouth and that's where we actually started at the beginning. And he's asking him something and Ed Norton's he can't talk, because the gun's in his mouth or whatever.
Yeah.
Ed Norton sees the guys from Project Mayhem pulling Marla off of the bus or something.
They show up and they've pulled her off of the bus.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I guess they're doing it to use her as leverage against him. I don't know.
This is all kind of
it gets a little confusing here.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't say the very end of the movie. It's memorable because of what happens visually at the very end.
Yes.
But it's not the tightest of endings. I feel like they didn't really know how to wrap this all up.
No, and I feel and what I was thinking when I was watching this, and that's again why I wanted to revisit the book, because I was I don't remember, because I feel for the most part they adapted this well, because sometimes it's hard when this is a book is like this to be able to to put this on screen.
Yes.
But I think they did a pretty good job with it. But I'm trying. I can't remember what happened at the end of the book.
Apparently, Chuck Palahniuk really liked the movie.
Yeah.
He said that he thought the movie improved on the book.
Okay.
That was his opinion of it.
Cool.
Which is pretty shocking. That's not.
That's not usually an author's feels. But the ending is just kind of messy.
It's a little messy.
But I mean, I don't hate it. It's fine. But it's just it's kind of I don't know.
Well, the thing that happens here, the big thing that happens here that does make sense is basically Ed Norton figures out, finally sinks in, I am this guy.
Right.
So Tyler has the gun in his hand,
I can
and then
hurt this guy.
Edward Norton's well, I have the gun in my hand because I'm him. Now the gun is in his hand, and the way to get Tyler is to get himself.
Yeah.
So he puts the gun in his mouth and he shoots himself. but he doesn't manage to kill himself.
No, he like shoots out the side of his face.
Right, yes. And it's a pretty good shot when you see him do it. It's CG, but it looks
good though. It's very like kind of slow-mo, and then the effects are good where just his face looks
messed up because it looks like he shot like his jaw off of its hinge or whatever. So his jaw's all weird.
Well, and everybody that's coming in too is like, that's when all the Project Mayhem guys come in, and they have Marla and everything, and everybody's like, "Sir, what's wrong with your face? You know, like, you look awful. We need to get a medic, like right away."
He's like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah, he's just like holding it.
But what's weird about it is he basically is like, "No, I'm fine. Just leave us alone." Or whatever. And they all just leave him alone.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't know what to do with them at that point. But it's nice because it ends up being just
it's him and Marla.
And they're standing there.
And he tells one of the guys to go get some gauze.
Yeah, he says, go get some gauze. Yeah, for his face. So they all leave, and then Where Is My Mind by the Pixies starts.
Yeah, but before that, he has a sweet moment with Marla, and he's like, "You're meeting me at a really weird time in my life." Because it's like, he finally like knows who he is. It's like, I feel like he's going to live, most likely.
Right.
And he's like, he doesn't want to be full Brad Pitt Tyler.
Yeah.
But he's also like gotten away from this like asleep at the wheel corporate guy who he was, of like with all the stuff.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be able to find somewhere in between that. Like, it's not, he doesn't want to be the leader of Project Mayhem or whatever, but I don't know. It kind of has like, in a weird way, it's kind of hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Pixies start with Where Is My Mind, which is like the beginning of the end of people using the Pixies in movies.
Yeah.
Like, it works here. And I remember, that's what I actually remember most about seeing in the theater, was hearing this song at the end, because I was just like, yeah, like this was, I mean, it was the time, it was, the time of the Pixies still.
It's a great music pairing with a final image.
Yeah.
They're standing before this window, and I think they're holding hands. And then all these buildings start to blow, crumbling, because they've all got bombs in them, and they're all blown.
And they're crumbling beautifully. Like, it's not, it's almost like fireworks.
It's like beautiful destruction.
Yeah, it is a beautiful destruction.
But unfortunately, a million filmmakers saw this movie and were like, I want to use Where Is My Mind in my movie.
Me too.
And it got way
overplayed, but this was where it was first.
Yes, this was the first effective
Yeah,
usage
and the
of it.
buildings crumble, the Pixies are playing, and that's it.
Yep.
We go to black, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
It actually, though, we do get, right before it goes to black, it does like a little splice. Because remember, like, we were hoping that we were going to get something at the end, maybe with that. But they do a little bit of like, it's
I was hoping we were gonna get a penis.
A giant dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it kind of does the little splice, like, what Brad Pitt's character would do in the film. So there's that.
Yeah, so that's the end of Fight Club.
Yeah.
Now, we're more than 20 years past this movie's heyday. How do you feel about it now?
I think it's still great. I mean, it's, it's one of those films that, like, I don't need to watch very often. Obviously, I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah.
But I think it's great. I mean, I think we talked about a lot of things that, were unfortunate takeaways from it, that were missing the point.
Yeah.
I think there's some things that just didn't age well, that we touched on throughout our talk also, that, are kind of hard to watch, knowing where we are now, and hopefully, have evolved some as well, and then devolved in other ways, which is not good. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. I think it really still holds up, and it speaks to me still. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a great film. I still really like Fight Club.
I, of course, still really like Fight Club. I feel it's sort of funny. I feel about it the way I sort of did originally, which is I really liked it. I especially really liked the beginning. And, the first half of it speaks to me a little bit more than the second half. Once Project Mayhem starts becoming the focus of the movie, I get a little bit less invested in it, because I just cannot relate to wanting to start a terrorist organization or a militia or anything.
Thankfully.
I mean, look, I'd like to see things change in a major way. And if systems needed to be brought down, I'd be willing to go along with it. But it's like, there's a certain point where I just kind of can't really fully invest myself in it. I can invest myself in the first part, where it's about a guy who's struggling with consumerism and all these things. Like, I definitely feel that still. There's, I feel like all of that stuff to me is just as relevant. It's hard because we've seen militias and shit happen that have been for movements I don't agree with.
Yes.
And so it's a little hard for me to get on board with this whole, like, let's tear down the system right now. Like, even though I do acknowledge the system
Is broken.
is broken and needs significant change, I don't think it should be done in the way this movie presents it, which I think the movie is saying it doesn't.
Yeah, the movie, that's the whole thing though, is the movie is saying this isn't good.
The movie doesn't condone it.
No, and that's why, and I agree with you. I mean, like the second half of the film is not my favorite.
Yeah.
And it's also, I really was paying a lot of attention to it today, whereas it's like the beginning I'm just so much more with.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, yes, it's not condoning this. It's showing like this is not a good idea. This is what happens. But I just feel like, as I said, people took the wrong thing from it.
Right. Well, and I think that art has a responsibility to look at things and to raise challenging questions. And, all of these, I don't have any problem with anything the movie is saying at all. It's not, I'm not objecting to its perspective. I think it's perspective. And the fact that it doesn't condone it while also saying, like, consumerism is a bad thing and things do need to change, like, that's all true. And just because one thing's true doesn't mean the other thing isn't true too. It doesn't make consumerism great, the fact that maybe blowing everything up isn't the solution. That still doesn't make consumerism a good thing. These are tough questions. None of us really know the real answer to it, and I feel that it's a really good movie that explores these ideas effectively. Plus, it explores the whole concept of toxic masculinity in a way that's, I think, still very relevant. Unfortunately, there's probably a lot of incels that have this movie on their top 10, but
for all the wrong reasons. But, and then I think it also is, again, with mental illness also is like, I mean, it's really like, it's fiction, but that is truly how it can be for someone who's having a split personality, so to speak, is like
having a psychotic
break where they're able to be super high functioning and do all of this stuff as this one persona, where the other persona is completely in the dark about it.
So why do you think this movie failed?
I honestly don't know, but since we talked about, just as we were talking about the scene where he is speaking to his boss about coming in and shooting things up, like, or that, where he's saying a person who made this, had left this on the copier, speaking in like, very vague, like a third person type thing, not saying it's him, but we know it's him, right?
Yeah.
But the threat that he's making about coming into the office and pecking
becoming
people off,
active shooter, basically.
Right. And now that I'm remembering, as we were talking, that, you were saying this came out and Columbine was definitely, I'm pretty sure it was in April of 99.
Yes.
Maybe that was, I don't know if that was even shown in the trailer, or maybe
no, but
I don't know. Maybe that was something that paid people off.
I mean, I think you could make the argument, even if you took that scene out, I think you could make the argument that maybe that sentiment was not what people were feeling right now at that moment coming after Columbine. Interestingly, The Matrix happened before Columbine, and like they wore
with
those coats and stuff because they liked The Matrix and stuff.
Yeah.
So The Matrix did not suffer because it came out before.
Yeah.
But this came out after. So I mean, I think there might be an argument that maybe people weren't feeling it because Columbine had happened.
I mean, just just having domestic terrorism in general, maybe not even just like going to the actual like rifle and shooting or whatever, but like being an act of domestic terrorism being so close down the line. I don't know. I mean, I was shocked to realize, because in my mind, this was like such a popular film, but like you said, it was that people didn't go to see it in the theater, and that it was kind of like an after the fact thing. And as we discussed, maybe popular for the wrong reasons. And I think that it did well overseas because of Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, like just being who they are.
Well, that brings me to my thoughts on why I think it didn't succeed, at least initially. And it's because I think ultimately, as I remember, the reviews for this when it came out were favorable, but a lot of people didn't really know what to make of it. I think it was asking some pretty complicated questions, and because it didn't really come down in any sort of like okay, this is like an action movie or this is like a black comedy. It kind of walks a line that's sort of uncomfortable, I think, for people. Like, you don't know what box to put it in, really. You know what I mean? Like, I even have this problem when, like, we have the Blu-ray, and you know how I like to organize Blu-rays by like genres. Like, what genre is this? Like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a David Fincher movie. It's like, if he's his own genre, that's where you'd put it. But it's like, I think it's just hard to put into a box. Like, what is this movie? I think people just didn't understand what it was. I think, you know, it had this crazy twist that sort of throws the whole thing into a whole different perspective. I think if it had come out a year or two later, it would have been way more successful. I think people just weren't ready for this kind of movie yet.
I will say this, though, as far as the twist goes, they do a really good job of explaining, like, what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, as far as, like, when it comes out.
Yeah.
So much, because I was thinking, like, the scene where he's in the hotel and Brad's there. And Brad's, like, basically telling him, like, this is what's happening. I am this, you know? And it's like, a lot of times that doesn't happen, you know? And so that really could leave some people like, huh?
Yeah.
But I feel like at least they really spell that out. So that if there is any sort of confusion, but at the same time, I agree with what you're saying. Like, what box do I check for this?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't honestly know, like, you know, from working at a video store and, you know, or just having people ask, you know, recommendations about movies. Like, had this not been, like, it's such a phenomenon now and such, like, part of our culture and a cult classic, so to speak, or whatever. People know Fight Club. But, like, if you were, you know, working at a video store when this first came out, like, I wouldn't really know. I couldn't compare another film to recommend, like, oh, if you like this, you'll like Fight Club.
Now it's the kind of movie where it's like, oh, if you like Fight Club, you'll like whatever.
Yes.
Boondock Saints or whatever movie I don't like, but whatever. That kind of movie. It became kind of a genre of, like,
it really kicked off.
Well, and like, and I think also, you know, if it had come out a year or two later, it would have been like, oh, it's got a great twist. And people would have wanted to see it for the twist because twist movies became big. I think they just didn't have a way to sell it to people then. They just didn't know, like, other than Brad Pitt. And, like, the hard truth about Brad Pitt is he doesn't sell tickets. He never really did.
It's such a bummer.
No, he's not. He's an actor people like, but he's never been the guy that was like. He's never been a Will Smith or anything. Like, he's never been and Edward Norton, certainly not. No. I think they were probably hoping to sell it on Brad Pitt, but unfortunately, as much as people love him, he doesn't sell tickets.
I think he does. I think he did abroad, though.
Yeah,
I think that's why
you
said it did better abroad.
But it's more of a European sensibility to it, too. So I think I'm sure European audiences got it more than Americans.
Well, they've been having twists happen for a long time.
Yeah.
Been twisting a long time there.
They're a twisted bunch.
Twisted.
All right, well, I'm going to go splice some frames of porn into movies and steal some liposuction fat and destroy something beautiful.
And I'm just going to listen to the Pixies.
That about does it today for Tentpole Trauma. If you like what you heard, check out our social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just look for Tentpole Trauma. That was easy, wasn't it? If you like us, hit subscribe and leave us a sterling review on iTunes, if you dare. If you really like us, head over to patreon.com and get involved in one of our fabulous tiers. You'll be glad you did. Want to communicate with Tentpole Trauma? Send an email to tentpoletrauma@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And who knows, one day you may even get your email read on one of our shows. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.